Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you, Madam Chair, for the introduction. I also want to thank the organizing committee, the program committee for the invitation, and a special thanks for the organizing committee and all the staff in support for the wonderful job they are doing. So I'm Roger de Keersmaker. I'm associated with IMEC, microelectronics research in Belgium, in Leuven in Belgium. My topic today for the 14.5 minutes I have left is education and training strategy in the light of the digital transformation and the connection between skills and jobs and this digitization. Productivity growth is the main driver of our living standards, but recently productivity growth has slowed down, as you can see in this slide, in most OECD countries. Now, the findings from this OECD research is, first of all, that this is not because of slowing down of innovation, but slowing of the pace at which innovation spreads out through the economy. This has to do with global connections, handicaps, maybe experimentation by firms, synergy between investments in R&D, in skills, in management quality, and also efficient allocation of scarce resources, such as skills. So all of this leads to the conclusion that indeed skills are important, and in fact maybe the gap both in quality and in quantity of skills are used to explain this. So skills do matter. I pulled this out of a document from the European Round Table of Industrialists, which they prepared in 2009 on the competitiveness of Europe. And they have a section also on skills where they say, okay, people, education and culture drive our productivity, and we should make better use of Europe's most precious resource, which is its people. And they go further and explain that we have to change the focus to productive and sustainable employment. We have to also put much more emphasis on continuous education and training. And we have to maybe reinstall a culture of motivation, dedication on the worker's side, but also combined with an attractive and stimulating working environment. The Boston Consulting Group publishes regularly innovation reports, and I found this interesting graph in its 2015 innovation report, where they collected input from the top 50 companies worldwide. And they asked them a question. They said, which areas will be most important, will most impact your industry in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? Now, it turned out that the number one concern is the speed of adopting new technology. And the slide here, I don't know if you can read that, but the slide shows the change in respondents, citing this as having a significant impact from the last year to the current year, so from 2014 to 2015. And for this adopting new technology, the change was 22%, which is indeed makes it the number one. The number two, if you cannot read this, is big data analytics, so also important in the digitization. And number three is technology platforms. This is a curve that you may have seen before, but I thought it was interesting also in this context. It illustrates the accelerating speed of innovation. the graph shows the time that is needed for an innovation to reach 50 million users. And we've all heard the example of the telephone, which took 75 years between, you know, the let's say the demonstration and then reaching this amount of users. The numbers in time-wise have gone down. For the iPad, it was something like 20 months. I found a little different numbers, but let's say 20 months, less than 2 years. And the Google Plus social network application took somewhere around 3 months to reach 50 million users in the second half of 2011. Now, I know it takes more time to develop the application, okay, but this shows that innovations are being introduced and are being absorbed at an increasing pace. Now, for me, this leads to the conclusion that at the bottom there, that learning has to happen at the speed of innovation. If you stop and think about this for a moment, if technology changes rapidly, you have to adapt your workforce to make sure that they can cope with this change. Otherwise, the industry risks to fall behind. The famous digital transformation that we're all talking about in recent times is actually the essence of what we have come to call the fourth industrial revolution. Okay? After the steam engine and the electricity, and then the PC computation, we now are in the era of cyber physical systems, as we like to call it in Europe, or IoT. So it is based on a strong digital technology sector, and that's the bottom part of this yin-yang symbol there. And this is computed to be worth 900 billion euros in total for Europe. And this is supposed to support, to underpin a digitized industry, which relies then on IoT, sensors, software, connectivity, big data, artificial intelligence with robotics, automation, industrial technology, also additive manufacturing, and so on, where both ICT and the famous key enabling technologies will meet and have a huge impact. And you can see on the top there that this digitized industry is representing 15% of our collective GDP. So this innovation in products, processes, and business models is going to be very, very important. Now that may come at a price. So the challenge and the opportunity comes with a challenge. As shown in this graph, over the past 50 years, and this is a graph for the US, published by the World Economic Forum last year, but trust me, this is equally true in other developed economies, so it also holds for most of Europe. It is seen that there has been a steady decline in jobs that involve routine manual and also cognitive skills. And that's the decline of the curves at the bottom there, you can see that. At the same time, there is an increase in jobs that require non-routine, either analytical or interpersonal skills. And so these forces, the forces behind this have been detected as the accelerating automation and digitization, which probably does not come as a surprise. So are we ready? Are we doing a good job in preparing our students? Now, I have also had for a long part of my career a teaching job at our local university. So this is a criticism that I think universities and technical schools at the same time have. This is a study from McKinsey, and it's interesting, that, but at the same time worrying, that 74% of education providers consider their graduates as being ready for the job market. So it's the blue bar on the right-hand side there. But if the same question was asked to employers or even the graduates, are you ready or are they ready for the job market? Only half as many, somewhere like 35% or so, said, yeah, I think they are ready, or I think we are ready. So this readiness gap is worrying. Okay? It means that there is a huge difference in strategy, in goals for the education, and this calls for a dialogue between education providers and industry. So the skills needed for the 21st century marketplace have also been categorized by the World Economic Forum. You see on the left-hand side the foundational literacies. These are the core skills that everybody going into the job market needs for everyday work, let's say. The second one is the competences. This is how what you would need to approach complex challenges. And the third one is the character. That is, what attitude do you have, what skills do you have to approach a changing environment. This is also translated into hard and soft skills. So the left-hand side is more the hard skills, the right-hand side is going into the soft skills, as PricewaterhouseCoopers yesterday reported in the other session. And ICT is indeed at the core of the foundational literacy. The worrying part is also that, yes, we need soft skills for our graduates, for our employees, but it is hard to measure them. Okay? We want certain skills that we don't know exactly how to detect even, and how to measure. Only in the working environment we will discover whether they have them or not. We need, so therefore, a coherent talent strategy which is evidence-based to balance the demand and the supply and the use of skills. And one of the basic principles should be a continuous learning and development, as shown on the top there. So yes, we need lifelong learning on the employer side, on the employee side, hopefully supported also by the employer. But there is also the need for retaining and reskilling workers constantly. And so that's the development part, which is a responsibility for the employer. Now, the European Centre for the Development of Vocational Training, CDFOP for some among you, reported some challenges with respect to skills development and matching skills to needs and supply. And the new skills agenda, which was recently published by the Commission, has to somehow confront this. So this was a survey among about 50,000 adult employees in 2014, and some of the challenges are listed there. So the skills matching ranks very low as a motive in individual job choices. There is a limited and segmented mobility across Europe among workers. There is a limited take-up of workplace-based learning, although it has a positive correlation with the faster transition to the first job. Skills gap has been reported, and surprisingly, maybe too many workers were found to have underused or even unidentified skills, which from an economic point of view is also a loss of efficiency. The new skills agenda for Europe, one of the flagship components there is the Digital Skills and Jobs Coalition that has been announced. It will be officially launched on the 1st of December in a conference. It aims at bringing together the member states and the stakeholders, including the social partners. The goal is to reduce this digital skills gap, establish national skills coalitions. One worry, one concern, and I know my time is up, so I have to hurry. One concern is that several DGs at the Commission are involved in skills and jobs. And I hope they will be able to agree on a common goal, a common strategy, and a common action plan towards this famous European skills platform. And I hope also that they are being joined by experts and advisory bodies that jointly will contribute to this, solving this skills issue. Ideally, I would like to see this as a high-level advisory group that is sort of advising the Commission and interacting with the various DGs and in a united way. Now I'd like for 1 or 2 more minutes to focus on the methodology of learning, okay, which also has to do with you know, learning the digital skills, maybe in a digital way. It starts with the observation that today's worker is overwhelmed, distracted, has little time. I think there's a study that found that people typically have between half an hour and 1 hour to do some kind of learning and development. And that it will probably not be among the 40 hours or so that they're spending at their desk. So we need flexibility with respect to where and how people are learning. Now, it is also becoming very clear that formal teaching, you know, what is labeled here as education, needs to be accompanied by exposure, which is a social interaction part, and experience, which is putting into practice what you have learned from a computer course or through books or in a classroom. And then the depth of learning will depend on the environment, actually. So these are the 4 E's that are listed here. This has been translated in the 70-20-10 learning paradigm. So 10 is the formal education, what you pick up from a classroom or a MOOC. The 20% is what you're adding in terms of learning through social interaction with a coach, maybe with your fellow students. And 70% is what you will learn through experience. So putting what you have picked up there already, so and putting that into practice. Now the exact numbers can vary. I know there has been debate about this, but the message is the same. The teaching part that we are focusing on maybe too much is actually the least important. I'm going to maybe skip this one. So the blended learning that we have talked about is this famous combination between offline learning and online learning. Yes, that's blended learning. But I'd like to use the term also for other kinds of blending. But the message at the bottom there, I think, is crucial. ICT technology does enhance learning, but it does not compensate for poor pedagogy. Put it a little bit more bluntly, a poor course is a poor course, even if you put an ICT sauce on top of it. Translated into the MOOCs, that means that yes, and this is following the 70-20-10 paradigm. So the top is you pick up some information, that is the first part, but it has to be followed by small private online courses, which I call here the SPOCs. So the MOOCs and the SPOCs go together. It's not a coincidence probably that a lot of MOOCs are free of charge. It's only in the SPOC phase that the effort becomes bigger and it requires an involvement, probably also from the employer, because that's where the cost becomes important, and this employer will have to support the employees. I'm almost done. Okay. The skills development has much broader impact than just helping the employer to make money and the employee to be happy and make a living. Okay. I think the economy as a whole benefits from it, and even society benefits from it. And this is my very last slide. If we take a long-term view on talent strategy, and this is maybe a little bit philosophical, we need to concentrate on development of employable skills. That's the top right there. Yes, the automation of certain tasks is seen as a threat, but this should not result in job losses necessarily. If the automated task is a complement to a human task with a high knowledge content, in our fast-paced industry, continuous learning and development is essential. That's the bottom left. And in these days of trade agreements, and as a Belgian, I'm very sensitive to the CETA that seems to be moving again. So we care about open trade, but most important maybe is also that we need open minds to see opportunities that emerge when we are determined to solve our problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roger. I would like to give now the floor to Luigi Galdabini and invite all the people who joined us a bit later to contribute to the session discussion using the Slido application. It's not something that you have to download. You can raise your question, writing down, or you will have the opportunity to raise a question at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me thank you before starting my speech, the organizers of this event, which is so important for the topic that is going to cover. Before starting with my topic and going into detail, let me just say a few words about my company, which was founded 126 years ago, and what is still fully owned by my family. We call this company as a worldwide family company. We have a research, apart from our main location, which is near the Malpensa airport, north of Milano, in Italy. We have a research and development plant in Zurich, Switzerland, and some offices in Detroit and Beijing. We operate with 3 different product lines, which is made of, very shortly, of straightening machines for automotive and steel industry. We have metal forming machines like presses for deep drawing and testing machines. Apart from that, really to stay in the innovative area of organized companies, we provide also services with support on site and training and calibration of our machines. We invest more than 7% of our turnover. So very important is that we have a green thinking attitude, and we have a 100% eco-compatible power generation and consumption in our company. In addition to that, which is related to my work, I'm the president of CECIMO, and that's why I'm here, basically. So CECIMO is the European Association of Machine Tool Industries, which is counting more than 1,400 machine tool builders, plus tool manufacturers and automation and robot systems. Out of these companies, almost 20%, 80% are SMEs. So this is the size of our majority of companies. There are 15 national associations involved, members in CECIMO, and we represent more than 39% of the global output of machine tool production in the side of very high quality. We are as well an export champion. We export 1 every 2 machines produced, and we build our competitiveness on research, know-how, and high skills. However, even if these are data which are promising and successful, there are many challenges which we are facing. And I would like just to address 2 main issues, which are globalization and digitization. Here in the slide, you can see on the left few numbers of our sector. So here you see that global machine tool consumption had a big drop in the crisis of 2008. So we fell down to 18% of world machine tool consumption. Now we raised again to 23, but we are in a stable area, but still far below the data before the crisis. On the other hand, on the right, you see the CECIMO exports, which is showing let's say, a very good and stable path. And from country data, I can tell you that, for instance, we are exporting mainly to emerging markets. Just to give you a figure, from 2008 to 2013, export to China, or machines to China, has increased from 1.7 to 3.7 billion euro, which represents a 2.2 factor of improvement. Now we can go into a little bit in the topic of digitization of manufacturing. We all know that advanced manufacturing business is changing a lot, and machine systems and factories are getting connected across the borders. So analyzing industrial data valuable along the global value chain, we have, as manufacturers, to improve performance, energy efficiency, as well as safety of our machines. So a lot of new service-oriented business models are emerging with the idea of providing greater value for end users. So in this respect, large ICT companies around the world are increasingly developing systems and solutions for the traditional manufacturers in order to be able to better connect our capital goods. Let me underline that according to a study anyway, 64 millions of machines on the ground in the plants are not network connected. So there is a big room for manufacturers to improve this data, to improve our offers. The digital transformations anyway requires to develop sophisticated business strategies, which can be only realized with the right skill set of our workers. That's why we are here to talk of this topic. Let me highlight a few trends that are actually experienced in companies. So many, you already know probably, that many low-skilled manufacturing jobs with manual tasks or routine tasks have been transferred out of Europe to countries which have a low labor cost. Also, technological progress might be made by automation systems and robots that carry out manual tasks have eliminated a lot of jobs. So this trend may mean that there are fewer positions. For instance, Skills Panorama forecast 5 to 10% decrease by 2025 in some occupations, including operators and machinery workers. Another forecast says that the current trends will decrease 2.8 million low and medium skilled jobs again by 2025 in the European manufacturing industry. Despite of that, there will be an increase, of course, of high-skilled jobs in the sector. For instance, the number of jobs in the manufacturing requiring high-level qualification is projected to rise of 21% by 2025. So there are some bad side of the medal and a good side of the medal. In particular, there will be very strong employment growth of science and engineering professionals in the manufacturing industry. The advanced manufacturing industry will also increasingly need workers that need to make a service job, like set up, monitor, and maintain the customized machines that we are now delivering. So we believe that technologies such as additive manufacturing, and cyber physical systems will drastically change vocational skills. So we have to put a lot of attention to education in schools and on the ground of our people. These technical changes will have a huge impact on maintenance workers. So in future, the role of monitoring and maintenance workers is expected to become more service-oriented. We imagine the manufacturing workforce need the skills to remotely, so from far, interpret the sensor data on maintenance requirements. This will result in maintenance workers requiring greater skills in customer service and quick understanding of the application of the manufacturing equipment. As well, and this is even more important, production process will become more international on a greater level of integration, and this will need more communication skills, which will be crucial in all manufacturing roles. Manufacturing workforce will be therefore expected to communicate with colleagues in different factories and clients in different countries with the help of smart devices, all the ones that we already know and the ones that will come in the future. To summarize, the European manufacturing sector will require people who are capable to collaborate across different areas in the technology field, like electronics, mechanical engineering, automation, computing and data analytics. Our teams will need to possess both software and hardware expertise to develop machines conducting complicated tasks and interacting with other devices. This is an overview of the changing advanced, excuse me. This is, I forgot I thought I had collected it and changed the slide. Anyway, let's see if we are, okay, here we are. So, I'm sorry for that. Now, having said that, with an overview of the changing advanced manufacturing industry and the implication for the workforce, we have to try to see which are the actions that the industry has to cooperate with to match the new challenges. One of these is the ICT application areas already mentioned, where manufacturing industry will need to strengthen its relations with educational providers from the fields of software, design, computer and information systems. The new business models are based on industrial data, will also require setting up small teams composed of ICT specialists and production technologies. So this will be what we call hybrid team, should be well integrated in the company with close links with other departments, all the departments that you can imagine in a company of technology development. We also have to bear in mind that in the manufacturing sector, learning is best achieved in the real working environment better than in classes. So we should invest more in work-based education in Europe and ensure that our workforce is trained at real working environment. European manufacturers training offerings has also to cover upskilling of existing workforce through continuous education programs. This is a must in order to make sure that our workforce is able to conform to the latest industrial technologies and raise its skill levels above the competitors. We have seen the same before said by the previous speaker. In parallel, we need also to make sure that our workforce make use of digital learning technologies at the early stage of education. This also underpins independent learning, as our workforce at different levels, from shop floor to management, will need to make more and more independent decisions on a daily basis, so more autonomous kind of work for our people. It's also important to keep in mind that not all of our schools possess the latest equipment available on the market, as they may be too expensive, too costly, and too rapidly declining in their technology. So we have to support our future workforce development with e-learning platforms, which will help to introduce new technologies to learners for the first time in an effective way. So we believe that blended learning composed of web-based modules, classroom teachings, and work-based learning can play an important role for the continuous training of the future. I would like to take the opportunity also to provide you with further information on a skill project led by the European machine tool industry, which is reflecting what we have just said. Under the leadership of Sesimo and the Italian, German, and Spanish members, we are working on EU-funded action called METALS, which is the acronym for Machine Tool Alliance for Skills. The project is identifying new skills needed to operate additive manufacturing systems and develop new learning platform with teaching materials for the use of learners and workers. So we have organized various industry workshops and identified the areas where there is a need for specific training of our workforce. This is to say that we look very carefully to this matter, and we are putting our efforts in this respect. Let's come attend to some messages for the policymakers. Recently, the Commission has adopted a new skills agenda for Europe. We welcome this agenda and we support, of course, its implementation, but I have to make a few comments. The education system in Europe should be more flexible. We need to create an education system which allows the transfer opportunities between vocational and academic path and between different disciplines matching our varying skills need. Opinion changes on the training times that should be or should become shorter, but advanced manufacturing workforce needs more time spent at industry, supported by shorter training programs in the classroom. So we stress these opportunities and this fact. Another point is cooperation between different sectors. The new EU skills agenda foresees the implementation of the blueprint for sectorial cooperation of skills. This is an important step which we support fully. For instance, we need to design structures and government programs which are supporting the action jointly developed by ICT companies and production engineering industry for the development of digital manufacturing skills, as said previously. The European manufacturing sector is very heterogeneous, and each business has its own way to train its workforce, depending on the specialized product and services. So in order to increase the awareness of the entire manufacturing industry, dissemination of the best training practice by forerunner companies should be supported by the public authorities. Last but not least, and I'm finished with this, manufacturing SMEs already take a large share of the burden for delivering training programs to the young employees who otherwise would not be operational in the companies. So SMEs have limited financial resources which make them vulnerable to the complexities. The rising complexities of technology and integration with ICT solutions increase the training cost, of course. This prevents them, or eventually prevent them, from investing for further in human capital and developing the new business and the new products which are needed, continuously needed. So all these things considered, education policies need to be designed with specific attention to small and medium enterprises. So funding schemes for education and training such as Erasmus Plus should be more accessible for SMEs, and they should contribute to the investment made in the workforce by the manufacturers. So I leave you with that. If you have any question afterwards, I'm ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galdabini, for your presentation. In the meanwhile, I see that we have some questions from the audience. I would like to thank you again and also to invite you to vote for this question or to pose new questions. And in the meanwhile, I would like to invite Mr. Albert Sangra for his presentation.
Good morning. First of all, thank you for the invitation to share this part of time with all of you. We are very glad to be here. I will skip some slides for the sake of not taking too much time, but you will have the presentation available too. So my name is Albert Sangra. I'm coming from the Open University of Catalonia, settled in Barcelona, and I'm currently the director of the UNESCO Chair in Education and Technology for Social Change. Well, I will try to tell you about 4 statements and some conclusions about what I'm going to tell you, that is focusing on the opportunity and the contributions of online education for the development of the reindustrialization and the training in Europe. Thinking on the fact that we are in an information and knowledge society, and the internet is shifting all the ways that in which economy, work, communications, and also education is going to be carried out, it's important to think that learning at this moment is asked to be lifelong, ubiquitous, flexible, global, contextual, sustainable. So everyone asks a lot for learning. Learning has to be everything at any moment, for everything too. But the fact is that learning is changing. Because of the interaction with the technology, learning is changing a lot. And this has to be considered because we cannot think on the traditional structures of learning that we used when we were young. So my first statement is that online education is working and it is growing a lot. And trying to demonstrate that, even if we don't have data on how online education is being developed in Europe, and this is a lack that we probably would need to solve, we have some data from the US. They have 16 years that are currently and permanently developing studies in order to know how online education is being developed. So we can see in this slide that students are growing. Currently, the last study closed in 2014, and there were 5.8 million of students that took some course online, and 2.85 millions did that everything online. So it's not some people doing that. It's a lot of people following online educations in some extent. At the same time, we can see that 72% is related to undergraduate programs and 30% to graduate programs too. And just there is a few people that are not taking any online course, in this case in the US. So it means that the growth of online education is not stopping at all. On the other hand, we can see that even considering not higher education but training, so the so-called e-learning, I would prefer to talk about online education for many reasons that I cannot now because of the shortage of time. But e-learning is the second more used method for training in companies, reaching the 43.5%. So it means that probably in the next year it will overcome the 50%. And traditional face-to-face training is slowing down in favor of e-learning. And we have this data from different studies too, so it's not just about one single research group. On the other hand, some other studies will highlight or have highlighted the potential of e-learning to impact in the society and the economy, especially in the developing countries too. And we have also studies that in my university, Martin Carnoy from Stanford University developed a study in which he demonstrated that they have positive relative earning gains after graduation, after having followed the undergraduate program only online, fully online. Okay. The Open University of Catalonia is one of the examples of that. I will just take some short time to tell you about, because it's the institution I know better. We have different knowledge areas, so we are not focusing on one particular one, but in arts and humanities, economy and business administration, psychology and education, computer engineering, multimedia and telecommunications, law and political sciences, information and communication sciences, and health sciences. All these are being offered from the university through bachelor programs and master's programs, but also 3 doctoral programs that we are currently providing, and also open courses and short specialization programs that sometimes can be done tailor-made for the companies that are interested in. So it means that this represents almost 55,000 students currently studying online at the Open University of Catalonia. So these are European data. And that we have also almost 25,000 graduate students at this moment. So it's working quite well, and people is really trusting on this way to study. At the beginning in 1995, we started to be a new player on this particular field, and we were such a kind of strange thing, but just some small courses were offered online or using technology. At the moment, we are a fully online university, trying to be flexible, adaptable, knowledge society-based, and especially skills-oriented. There are other examples currently, as the Open University of the UK that moved from traditional distance teaching to online too, or the Western Governors University at the US that is also working focus on competencies-based programs, and other providers of open courses like MOOCs, like Future Learn, Iversity, Coursera, EDX, or the experiences of the peer-to-peer university and the University of the People. Even the MIT Policy Initiative mentioned that promoting online is an important facilitator in higher education. So I would like to focus on that because I think it's important, and I do believe on blended solutions, but blended solutions coming from knowing how online can develop their own potential, because usually blended solutions are based on what we know about face-to-face education and training, not about which is the potential of using online education in this scenario. So I mean that I will skip some of these slides. The second statement is about that online education is working well. It's not about that people do not learn what they have to learn. We have several studies showing that online students can perform even better than face-to-face students. And most of the studies, they conclude that there is no significant difference between both. And this means that probably they are not using a different methodology. When you are focusing on online education, you need to develop a different methodology. It's not about translating what you are doing face-to-face by using a different technology. It's changing the way that you are approaching the students. It's changing the way that the students have to perform as students. And this is very, very important in order to get the potential that online education can give us. So here you can see several studies that demonstrate that online students can perform better than face-to-face students, or at least the same. Another study that we have been developed jointly with the Penn State University at the US and currently in progress demonstrates that the students agree on the kind of skills they have achieved using online education or following online education programs. And most of them are coincident with the literature that says that most of these skills are very useful for job purposes too. And finally, from the last report of the Allen and Simon report from Babson College in the US, says that online education as good as or better than face-to-face instruction. 71.4% of all the people involved consider that this is so. So I think this is important because the growth has been very, very relevant. It was a 57% in 2003. So it means that when you are using online education and you are developing a good model of online education, confidence is growing too on the results of it. Because we know that quality is a concern about when we are being involved in online education. But this is also being solved too. Third statement is that online education could contribute a lot to the human resources training and updating in Europe's reindustrialization process. I just show you some data from different studies too. The JISC employability study in 2015 shows the kind of elements that and skills that are coming from learners that employers will validate and value very much, and how institutions also benefit from the employees that are coming from online education. Also, some studies on efficient employability skills show that most of these employability skills are coming from the adult education principles: responsible learning, experiential learning, as we have seen, cooperative learning, and reflective learning. A study from the Australian Flexible Learning Framework in 2009 shows that significant improvement is achieved through online education. So all this has been improved through the development of online education programs. On the other hand, we should not forget that we are developing a new way of working, the so-called networking. So using intensively ICT, in which industry strategy is oriented to permanent adaptation to changes in the global business environment, that is flexible, autonomous, decentralized, and objectives-based work organization. So all this is something that can be easier achievable through online education, because the students will work in that way. I have identified some comments in the previous speeches that says that it's okay. So we need to learn at the same speed of innovation. So in order to do that, I think that we should provide the fundamentals, and especially to learn how we will work at the end. And we will especially work in a world in which technology and online situations will be the usual ones. The fourth and last statement is that higher education will face a necessary shift concerning its extractor, and this is an opportunity for us. So higher education will have to be based on some important elements: flexibility, interaction, introducing in interaction, obviously, simulation and gamification too, personalization, considering learning analytics, but also qualitative data on that, collaboration, and informalization. All these elements will have to be taken into consideration in order to develop a new model of higher education. In order to introduce too, and I perfectly agree on my colleagues' suggestion of blended learning, not only talking about face-to-face or online, but also formal, non-formal, and informal learning, because we are people are developing a way to learn in which they are thinking to learn lifelong and also life-wide, because there are a lot of time during every day that it's been used to learn something, and we should not forget this time. At the end, we always work on the basis of the iron triangle between access, cost, and quality. But it's very important to consider openness in this moment, because people can use anything that it's been used for learning. Methodology, that it's key. So, for instance, one of my critiques to MOOCs is that it's an old tradition model for learning. It's nothing new, nothing innovative at all. But new methodologies and new pedagogies can help us to go further, and especially considering recognition, because it is one of the missing points and pending points currently in our higher education system, not only in Europe, but worldwide, in fact. So at the end, I advocate for the concept of learning ecologies, and to use a learning ecologies analysis framework in which you can see that people will learn from formal, non-formal, and informal ways, but also they will develop different modalities, face-to-face, blended, and online. And at the end, the decisions are going to be made by the individuals. They will decide how they will learn. So the higher education system has to take into consideration that in order to provide good materials, good content, but also good support through teaching, in order that people can really take the advantage of that. I would like to show you something that I think it's interesting as an idea, and I'm finishing. In one of the reports of the MIT, that it's called the Future of IMT Education Task Force in 2014, they suggested to analyze different kind of audience, different kind of modalities for learning, and different kind of outcomes. To put them in relation is very important, because not everything serves for everything. So it is important to identify which is the main aim of the training or of the learning, and which are the audience, and which is the best modality in order to get the desired outcome. This is important. So we will have a wide spectrum of possibilities. We have not to think about big programs, closed programs, but modular and even granular programs that will let us to adapt to the need of every single people for the sake of the job. And finally, I agree, I repeat the idea of we need to work much more about accreditation, how to demonstrate that we have learned is really what we'd like to learn and we need to learn and to be accredited properly. So my conclusions are that a new and more flexible and adaptable structure of higher education courses has to be carried out, that industries and universities has to develop framework agreements for mutual benefit. I don't think that the university is right with everything, but I don't think that industry is right with everything. I think that we need to understand each other for mutual benefit, for the benefit of society. That online education has a big potential that have to be unleashed, and that gathering of evidence of best practices and outcomes has to be fostered, because we usually talk about best practices, but we don't have evidence of what is really happening, and this is very important. It's not about coffee talks, it's about evidence, and research can help us a lot to that. And that European-led research has to deep in the contribution of online education for getting a better skilled workforce, and considering learning design, quality assurance, accreditation, and online teacher training, because teaching online is not the same as teaching face-to-face. We need to develop also particular and deeper skills to do it as well as we can. So maybe with all of this, we will learn to surf in this very unstable world that this is, and especially considering what we are talking about industry too. So thank you very much, Jacques Nguyen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sangra. We go to the last presentation by Mr. Vincent Berruto. Thank you very much for also voting for the question, and feel free to use the application Slido for further questions. This is your last chance.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Risa. Do you hear me in the back? Yeah. Okay, my name is Vincent Berruto. I'm the head of the Energy Unit at the European Commission Executive Agency for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. And what I would like to do in the next 15 minutes is to introduce you a very concrete initiative which the European Commission has launched to raise the skills of the building workforce in the field of sustainable energy. And before I present the initiative, I should say that it fits within the wider context of the EU energy policy, because buildings is an important sector. It's 40% of the energy that we use in Europe, and this is known to be the largest cost-effective savings potential that we have. So we need to tap this potential to achieve the energy policy targets that we have set in Europe. And when we talk about buildings, the buildings of today are not as simple as the buildings of 20 years or 50 years ago. And now the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, for instance, in Europe, asked member states to have new buildings at nearly zero energy buildings by 2020. And also buildings undergoing major renovation should meet these standards. And when we talk about these kind of buildings, we're talking obviously about a super insulation that need to be properly sized. We need to minimize the thermal breaches during the construction and during the design. We need to have a very good air tightness for the building, and we need, in some cases, also to foresee heat recovery so that the heat that exits the building can exchange its energy with the entrant airflow in the building. And on top of that, there's more and more integration of ICT in buildings for home automation, to optimize the storage, the production, and the use of energy, and also to ensure demand response so that the demand is adapted in function of the price of energy or in function of the availability of renewable energy sources. So by 2020, all buildings should be like that. And to have such buildings, we need the workforce able to not only construct, but also design and maintain these kind of buildings. I agree with one of the previous speakers saying that maintenance is also very important. When we talk about the construction industry, we talk about more than 3 million companies, and most of them are micro companies of less than 20 workers. They represent more than 8% of the gross domestic product in Europe, and more than 6% of the total employment of the workforce in Europe. And what we found out by commissioning studies back in 2011 is that there's a clear lack of energy skills for this building workforce. That was pretty obvious, and that's also the message we got from the construction industries and from the different market actors. And that prompted us to launch an initiative which we supported under a program called Intelligent Energy Europe, which was the main non-technological program of the European Union in the field of sustainable energy. That was back in 2011, and the aim was to raise the energy skills of craftsmen and other on-site workers in Europe. Very clear objective. Before embarking into such initiative, we commissioned an ex-ante study to find out whether this would be cost-effective to put EU money, public money, into such a scheme. And the ex-ante evaluation said, yes, you can start, and with a clear focus at the beginning on craftsmen and other on-site workers. The initiative was made up of 2 pillars. A first one where we surveyed the situation. It was a kind of status quo analysis to see what is the level of skills of the existing workforce, where do we have gaps in the training offers that exist in Europe. And it was also, the purpose of that pillar 1 was also to gather the different actors, not just the construction industry, not just the energy expert, not just the vocational training experts, but all of them together around the table and meet with them, discuss with them, and see what needs to be done, and then decide on a list of concrete measures that would then be endorsed at a high level in each of the member states. That was the spirit of the Pillar 1, that was the basis of the whole initiative. And on that basis, we designed a second pillar, which is there on the right-hand side, which was to build on the results of Pillar 1 and define new training schemes or reinforce the existing training schemes so that we could fill the gaps that were identified in the first period. And in our program, the Intelligent Energy Europe program, we launched national projects, which was rather new for us because we used to work and found transnational projects, and that was a very new approach where we could get the national actors in the countries and to nevertheless have a European added value of the initiative. We asked the different players to come and meet regularly every 6 months and to exchange about their experience and to also peer review what they were doing in their country. We were surprised in 2011 when we launched the initiative to see that there were already in the first year 21 countries which were keen to join the initiative and train their building workforce. And that was followed the following year by 9 other countries. So the initiative is covering now 30 countries, which is quite a wide outreach. The main findings of the first phase was that there's a slight shortage of construction workers by 2020, but what is far more obvious is the need for training of the current workforce, which is stronger than the estimated need for additional workers. And we looked at all the projects in all the 30 countries and added up all their needs, and we found out that there are more than 3 million workers which will require upskilling between 2011 and 2020. Another aspect that came out of that first phase was that the different players insisted on the importance of transferable and cross-trade knowledge and skills. And that reminds me a little bit what the representative from the industry said. We need to have people who know what is being done in the other fields. And that was the same finding that we found in the construction industry. And then we moved to Pillar 2 once we had this knowledge of the situation. And in Pillar 2, we got 10 countries on board in 2013 and 11 more countries in 2014. And you can see in 2014 we had Slovakia, and one of the driving forces, I don't know if Mr. František, doctor, is here in the room, but okay, yes, and so that was that's going very well in Slovakia, but I'm not going to give an example of Slovakia, but the example of Ireland, because they started earlier. And in Ireland, very interestingly, in their first phase, when they looked at the status quo, they found out that 60,000 workers in Ireland would need upskilling until 2020. And they started with training the trainers who would then go on site and train the workers. They've trained so far 57 trainers. And interestingly as well, they put in place a national register of qualified workers. And that was open a few months ago, and that was endorsed by the Minister of Housing. And the idea there is to let the possibility for every worker to register its training, his or her training records in the register, so that the clients would have access to the information, and the trainees will be able to market their new qualifications. To understand better the results that we've achieved in the first pillar of the initiative, the one running from 2011-2013, we commissioned an independent study which was done by COE to look at the results, the actual results, and that study was finished in early 2016. So I give you here the results. They found out that overall in the 30 countries, the initiative mobilized about 1,800 people from the very different disciplines. And they interviewed hundreds of people. I think there were 400 interviews, and 84% of them found the initiative very relevant, and found that the first time that we have such a gathering at European level of people from both the education, the training, the energy and the construction sectors. And the gap analysis was also found to be fairly unique and a solid basis for the second phase of the initiative. They studied each of the 30 national roadmaps. So these were the national strategies drawn by the different actors at national level, and they found them of high quality. Of course, depends from country to country, but they found that generally they include concrete suggestions, and the fact that they were endorsed at high level was a key achievement of the initiative. They also found that build-up skills findings were also taken into consideration in other initiatives. And in Slovakia, I know it's been taken into account in the National Plan for Renovation of Buildings. A little bit on the outlook now in the last minute. What will happen next? I mean, the build-up skills is running now. Earlier this year, the European Commission adopted a strategy for heating and cooling. And in the list of recommendations that the European Commission is putting forward, there is the suggestion to extend the work of build-up skills to other construction professionals. Bear in mind that the initiative was for craftsmen and other on-site workers, and so the communication of February is putting the question whether we should not extend the initiative now to other construction professionals, engineers, architects, for continuous training still. The evaluation that we did also recommended to keep developing synergies with other EU programs. I mean, that's something we have tried to do with limited success, I must admit, until now, and we need to continue and reinforce our efforts, in particular the connection with the European social funds, where there's a lot of money, a lot of public money to train the workforce. And we keep trying to make the link with that, and we start to succeed in certain countries. And we will continue at least next year to support this kind of initiative under Horizon 2020, the energy efficiency part of Horizon 2020, which my team is managing. And if you're interested in support, then I invite you to go and see the priorities. There's one priority called EE14. If you type on the Horizon 2020 portal, you will see the description of the priority, and you will be able, if you're interested, to apply for funding until June, 7th of June next year, which is the deadline. My last slide is one that I made in response to the request from the conference organizers, who asked me, when could such a scheme be extended to other sectors, in other industrial sectors? And they asked me to speak about the lessons that we learned inside Build Up Skills, and explain these lessons so that anyone interested in replicating the scheme elsewhere would be able to take them into account. Well, the first of the lessons, I think, is that the ex-ante evaluation that we launched back in 2011 before starting the initiative was very useful, because that, for us, was the assurance that the initiative would be cost effective and that it would be worth investing public money, taxpayers' money, into such a scheme. The gap analysis as well was very interesting, which was done in the first pillar of the initiative, because that was offering a very solid basis for what happened next in the second pillar when we started creating new training schemes. The high-level endorsement of the roadmap, the strategies which were designed in the first phase between 2011 and 2013 were endorsed at a high level in each of the member states. And that was a key to the success of the initiative, because then it was easier, of course, to implement actions after the strategy was endorsed. Then the strong buy-in of the stakeholders of the countries was also instrumental in the success of Build Up Skills. The fact that we got 21 countries in the first year, 9 others in the second year, and then overall 30 countries created a European movement and incentivized more people to follow suit. And that was a critical mass of actors that were necessary for the initiative. Since we were paying national team to work together, we had to ensure exchanges between these different teams, and that was very important. And this is why we invested quite a lot of our time and resources into having these meetings with all the stakeholders 2 times a year, and that we continue now. There's a next meeting coming early December, and we will keep doing that. Then the synergies with funding program, I've mentioned that. That's probably an area where we need to be better, and we keep trying. I heard yesterday afternoon about possibility of funding from different sources. I mean, everyone was very enthusiastic about that, but I didn't hear about concrete examples. It's not obvious in practice. We keep trying. I think there's a possibility to do much more there and create a real impact. And last, I think I would also insist on the need for accompanying measures, and in particular what we would like to do now that the schemes are in place, that we've got the solid basis, is to raise demand for qualified workers. I mean, there's no point having the schemes in place if the workers don't come and use these possibilities. So we want to push the demand for such qualified workers. And in exactly 15 minutes, that will be my conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also for your skill and ability in keeping so perfectly the time. So, well, I would say that I have collected a lot of interesting input, but also I see that from the question from the audience that there are some points that probably you could be interested in answering to. For example, of course, let's say the most voted question is related to the possibility to use the scheme that you have described right now. Vincent, can be applied to, for example, different sectors. At the same time, there is a lot of interest in understanding about the continuous education and training, if it can lead to effectively gain a new qualification that can be spent also in other working environment, and why not in what happens if they will be spent in other member states. This is another problem, because we speak about the global Europe, and so and not only Europe, I would say also. And then there were also concern from your, well, many positive points in your presentation, but also I collected a couple of concerns. One that has also reminded by Vincent right now concerning the idea, well, we have very good ideas, but then how can we really implement them in the real concrete world? So, for example, Roger, you were also raising the point that there are a lot of effort at the Commission level for highlighting the need for funding or investing in continuous education and in skill capacity, but then who is doing what? So also that has been debated in the last year in the, for example, in the high-level group on key enabling technologies as well, and then the measure is difficult to be concretized. Also, I realized the concern that Luigi was raising about the fact that, okay, we speak about this need and we also have good example in industries, but then the weight of the continuous education in large enterprise and small SME in SME is absolutely makes a big difference. So as many of our countries have a lot of industry effort based on the SME capacity, we also have to be very, very concrete about this point. And last but not least, MOOC, very interesting example for a very flexible education system. But now the question that the audience raises is also, but will the European education provider, so I also read here not only the MOOC, but also, can we say, the traditional one, be able to face the innovation speed at the same level? So I would like our speaker to have a say on this point. Who wants to start?
About continuous education in small companies, I can just go a little bit on the practical field to say that this is really very difficult. I just give you a case. We were talking of service people. Our service people, typical in machine tool industry, are always somewhere to work, so they are not always in the company. And so also this kind of job is not predictable. So something is programmable, but maybe more than 50% is not programmable. So so this is the first difficulty. We have to make training for people that we don't know when they're present. Second, continuous training. We have to make continuous training at work, so on site, in a company made by somebody else. It's easy to hire somebody, a teacher, pay the teacher the bill, and have the teacher in our company to make a certain training. It's much more difficult to find some other worker more experienced or experienced in a certain topic, training his mates in the company, because he has to get prepared for a training. He's not a trainer, he's a worker. Well done. And so this is another problem. So I understand that maybe for the academics, some of you are, looks maybe very easy or very silly, but this is the practical problems we have in small, medium-sized company.
I just can give some kind of answer about that, and if the European education providers will be able to face the innovation speed. I fully agree with what you have said, because usually training is very often reactive. So we have to train or to prepare people for the unknown future. So how to do that? And then is when educational institutions consider that maybe learning never will, not the educational institutions, learning never will get the speed of innovation. Because if not, then it is not innovation. It is something that we know, already know. So it's not about that. So when something is going to be innovative, it is because we didn't think about it before. So we cannot plan the training for that. So this is something that is conceptual, and we need to understand this point. So from our perspective, probably the best solution from the education providers is to provide the fundamentals, to make people learn how to adapt to the uncertainty, how to face the new things, how to be creative. And this means that it's not about doing something particular. It's about thinking out of the box in several occasions. So it's not easy, because we are asked for providing solutions, single solutions, but what we need is to provide a new way of thinking, and this is not about a very practical thing. So it's in this sense, it's quite difficult. So from my point of view, the fact is that European educational providers can do their best in order to provide these fundamentals, in order to establish a structure that can be easily adaptable and quickly adaptable, as I suggested before, but probably we cannot have the main aim of being at the same speed as innovation, because I think it's impossible. On the other hand, I agree on that fact that, for instance, the accelerating speed of innovation about a telephone 75 years and iPad 21 months and Google Plus 88 days, but they also die faster. Don't forget that. Don't forget that maybe we are going to train to something that will disappear before the people will apply what they have learned. So this is important to take into consideration, which is the difficulty of the relationship between training and working. And as you have mentioned, this is one of the points, and the other one is that the things are much faster than we can get them.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on the challenges to train the continuous training of the workforce. I mean, I fully agree with the representative of the industry. In addition, in the construction sector, what we've noticed is that there are other challenges that we need to address, in particular the fact that the trainees sometimes don't even have the basic literacy skills, and they very often don't even speak the language of the country. So the national teams had to come up with all kind of ideas on how to train these people, and sometimes in very, very simple ways. So we're far away from the e-learning, of course, and the online, but they were some of the tools that they've designed, and sometimes even just using drawings was proved to be quite effective with this kind of people. Whether now we could extend the initiative to other sectors, I mean, that's your first question. I think, yes, possibly. I mean, there's a lot that can be learned from the build-up skills, which could then be taken into account, and probably there will be economies of scale of replicating the same to other sectors. On the other hand, the beauty of the initiative was that it was focused. I think one of the reasons why it was effective as well was that the public money, was focused on a specific target group, which were craftsmen and other on-site workers. And I think that enabled us to identify clearly who were the actors in all the countries, and to mobilize already 1,800 people working in this area. If we had been wider from the start, I don't think we would have achieved the same. The process would have taken longer to start with, and then probably the initiative would have been less effective. So now what we're reflecting on is whether we could extend the initiative to other construction professionals, but I think that requires also a little bit of homework to see whether that would be cost effective to do that, and which type of professionals, and how to best plan this activity if we were to extend. So we think it can be extended, but we're cautious, and we think there needs to be some analysis of the pros and cons of doing it.
Well, I agree with the comment of Albert, that the innovation speed by definition has to be larger than the learning speed. Otherwise, you know, it would not be innovation. I think it's a very interesting way of putting it. But maybe two comments there. First of all, I think the learning speed in this case has to be seen also as the speed at which the educational system reacts to new technologies coming on board. And it should not take 5 years to decide on a new course, find a professor, you know, appoint him, find him an office, and I think that's what we have to change. If there is a new technology that becomes important, we have to find, you know, the coaches, set up the system within months rather than in years. I think that's the essence of my message here. And yeah, you have to be very proactive also there. Okay, I remember a case where you know, a professor was going to have his course, you know, put on into a MOOC, okay, and then he came and he said, look, here are my 200 slides that I'm usually using, you know, here is the course. Well, you know, grow up, huh? I mean, at that point you have to have somebody who is going to adapt, you know, this material and make it into a MOOC. Then you have to identify the coach who is going to interact with your virtual classroom and, okay, and make it worthwhile. It's not only the material, but it's also the way you interact with the students and add to the methodology. Okay, that's important. And also, I think we are changing the way in which we are teaching, and I appreciate a lot, you know, the Open University of Catalonia there. What you're doing is fantastic, and I'm sure there are others doing similar things. I think we have to get the students into an environment for teaching which is similar to the environment which they will face later in the working environment, okay? Solving a problem in a working environment is actually very similar to grasping the essentials of a technology and interfacing with you know, classmates. You know, they may not even be physically with you, but at a distance and interact. I mean, there are examples that if you give a student the answers to a set of questions that one of his colleagues, you know, came up with, and without him even having read that chapter, he is going through that, and then now he is going to read the chapter and will do much better in a way because he has been exposed in a social environment. Okay. And indeed, universities have to adapt. There was a case at our university, I won't criticize others, but where students were tackling for a PhD actually a very complex problem, okay? And after having worked on this for several months, they applied to have a joint PhD approved, okay? Because they were interfacing so intensively that it was hard to decide, okay, who is doing what here? I think there was a team of 3 students, I forget the details. Well, it was refused by the faculty because you have to write your 200 pages individually to show that you can do research. Well, sorry, but that was 100 years ago. Today, you will not individually solve any problem in the working environment. So there also the universities, I think, have to be realistic and face the real working environment. Okay, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions from the audience? Okay, so if not, I appreciate a lot this session, and I also would like to thank all the speakers for their fruitful contribution and also for their inputs to the discussion. You, the audience, for being able to reach us more or less on time this morning, and also for your question, and the organizer of this conference for the great effort they have devoted to the success of this conference. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks to the speaker.
And we thank the chair for running a perfect session here.